I'm back. Issued by the pro-contraception, pro-abortion, pro-perversity, Kathleen Sebelius, the Secretary of the United States Department of Health and Human Services, which was created, which was the outgrowth, the reorganization in 1979, I believe, of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, which was created in 1953 under the administration of Dwight David Eisenhower to put all of the disparate agencies, quasi-governmental agencies, and other things created under the New Deal of Franklin Delano Roosevelt into one department. Not that that meant unity or coherence of policy in the department. Something for the subject of an American government, of course. And but Kathleen Sebelius and Obama, I mean, a lot of people were giving thank you. I just saw an article online before I came over to the library to do these recordings, and people were giving their thanks for gay marriage, for the legalization of marijuana, for abortion, for the contraception mandate, for Obamacare, for Obama's re-election. It's madness. Stop idolizing the false ideas of this country, ladies and gentlemen. The false ideas upon which this country was founded, because the so-called good intentions of the men who founded this country matter not. False intentions, false ideas lead inevitably to horrible consequences, no matter the intentions of those who possess them, leaving their subjective judgment to Christ the King alone. Stop idolizing these men, praising them. Cardinal Rodriguez, quoted by Mrs. Hertz in the Star-Spangled Heresy, went on to say, "It is true that the Grand Lodge Masons of New York have declared that they do not want affiliation with lodges which do not acknowledge God or the Bible, but that does not mean an absolute breach at all." And he quotes William A. Rowan, who in The Builder wrote, quote, "There is only one God, Father of the human race. There is rock over which we build. The holy rock is the great cross in masonry, not the cross of the divine Redeemer. On these principles, I dare soul, our great jurisdiction will be in union with the great jurisdictions of the universe." Hello, Captain Video! With a view to better reciprocal understanding, closer relations, and a common action to realize the Masonic unity and make the spirit of brotherhood progress. All types of masonry, says the Cardinal, and this is Solange's going on to say, are serving as a base to that mysterious pyramid in which the top Satan is worshipped and Jesus Christ and God are renounced, and where there is taught as an ideal universal rebellion and absolute licentiousness. Behold the world in which we live. Cardinal Rodriguez said, everything is building to that base, from the base of the pyramid in masonry, in which at the top Satan is worshipped, and Jesus Christ and God are renounced, and where there is taught as an ideal universal rebellion and absolute licentiousness. You see the licentiousness here today? It abounds. It is all around us, ladies and gentlemen. This is no accident. Those who deny or are indifferent about the Incarnation, or who believe in various errors about our Lord and His revelation, can do nothing other than to sow seeds of destruction, of corruption. Yet it was that Catholics from the very beginning in this country, made their accommodation not only with Protestantism, but with Freemasonry, as Mrs. Hertz went on to say. She said, William J. Whalen in Christianity and American Freemasonry says, quote, Daniel Carroll, brother of the first American bishop, was active in Masonry. And apparently Bishop Carroll did not consider the papal ban applicable to this country until sometime after 1800, setting the stage for the constant plea of the American bishops, the true American bishops, before the so-called Second Vatican Council, and there are many of those true bishops who lived and continued on after the council, succeeded ultimately by men who are not bishops, because the conciliar right of episcopal consecration is sacramentally invalid. It is powerless. It does not confer the fullness of the priesthood upon a man who's been ordained to the priesthood legitimately, according to the legitimate sacramental rights of the Catholic Church, the valid sacramental rights of the Catholic Church. And we're different. We don't need to have a Catholic state here. Everything's fine here. It's enough to be part of the marketplace of ideas. That the decree from Rome doesn't mean anything. We can't have any foreign powers interfere with us. And Mrs. Hertz gives an example. For example, Bishop Carroll discussed the various censures of the Holy See on the lodge question in a letter to a layman in 1794. He added, this is a quote from John Carroll, I do not pretend that these decrees are received generally by the Church, or have the full authority in this diocese. Masons, no, they don't have, we don't receive it, therefore it isn't so. Now, in my youthful days as an eager conservative defender of the faith under John Paul II, I would wave in the faces of disobedient presbyters, sometimes true priests, others I know now to be presbyters, who are violating liturgical norms spelled out on the Protestant and Masonic Novus Ordo service, which I've always had problems with, but said I would suffer with my Lord, and he's suffering there, I'll suffer with him. Well, no, he's not there. Our Lord wants us to embrace the cross, but we don't go looking for suffering where there isn't there, where he isn't there, to suffer with him where he isn't there, because it's not our Lord. And I would wave a document issued by the then named Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of Divine Worship, I think it was called Sacraments and Divine Worship, in 1980, Inestimabile Donum, following up on John Paul II's Holy Thursday letter to Minichi Chennai, and which he apologized for abuses, as he would do again in Eucharistica de Ecclesia in 2003, almost the exact same apologies for offenses to the ecclesial sense, the liturgical abuses. Well, the Novus Ordo is the liturgical abuse par excellence. And I would wave and I would say, oh, look at this, and you can't do this, you can't have altar girls, you can't have communion of both kinds, you can't do this in Inestimabile Donum. Shut up, kid. There I was, what, 29 years old, going on 29, 1980? In my 30s, in the 80s. Come on, kid, shut up. Get out of here. In fact, I think it was one of my friends complained, wrote a letter, as many of us did, to the local chancery office and got Inestimabile Donum, to his local bishop, so-called. Inestimabile Donum has not been received by the American bishops, and so therefore the decrees against Freemasonry have not been received by the Church, by his diocese, meaning the Diocese of the United States of America. Therefore, it wasn't binding. The American bishops have always been like this. The social teaching of the Church, we haven't received it. Quas primus, not binding. America is special. America is special. Sometimes, as I'll explain in subsequent presentations, the American bishops of the 19th and 20th centuries got their way with Rome because, frankly, of the money. The Church is a human institution. It's composed of human beings. It's divinely founded, divine institution, composed of human beings. It's not a human institution. It's divinely founded, but composed of human beings, weak vessels of clay. And frequently the Vatican gave in to American bishops, gave in to Cardinal Gibbons on the matter of the Knights of Labor in the 1880s, I believe, and gave in on to the American bishops on short sleeves, acceptable for Mass because, well, that's the style here. A rescript was given in 1930 for that. We're different, we're special. Sometimes, yeah, the Vatican gave in under true popes for a variety of reasons, not the least of which being Peter's pence. The American bishops collected and sent over a good deal of loot to the Vatican, and God unfortunately has talked. But God's holy providence, and Holy Mother Church would have to be, the church militant would have to be chastised because of these accommodations. No such accommodation goes without its chastisement. And certainly we are being chastised for that and our own infidelities, many that they are. I speak for myself. So Carroll said, no, these decrees against Masonry have not been received by the church. And Masons, Mrs. Hertz pointed out, laid the first cornerstone for St. Mary's Church, the first Catholic church in Albany, New York, and the first cathedral in that diocese. Catholic sightseers in Baltimore should find Bishop Carroll's first cathedral worthy of notice, before it was designed by the Masonic architect of the Capitol, Benjamin Luttrell, but it bears a great resemblance to the Capitol in many ways, and is an especially fine example of the Enlightenment style then being popularized by the sons of Hiram Abiff. And we see, of course, that the generic references to God made by one ruler of the United States, one president of the United States after another, were accepted by Catholics as being good enough for God. For example, take for example a quote from George Washington's first inaugural address in on April 30th, 1789, in New York, where he was sworn into the presidency. He said, "Having thus imparted to you my sentiments as they have been awakened by the occasion which brings us together, I shall take my present leave, but not without resorting once more to the benign parent of the human race, in humble supplication that since he has been pleased to favor the American people with opportunities for deliberating in perfect tranquility and dispositions for deciding with unparalleled unanimity on a form of unanimity, there was great disagreement, a unanimity of government for the security of their union and the advancement of their happiness, so his divine blessing may be equally conspicuous in the enlarged views, the temperate consultations, and the wise measures on which the success of this government must depend." And John Adams, in his first inaugural address on March 4th, 1797, said, "And may that being who is supreme over all, the patron of order, the fountain of justice, and the protector in all ages of the world of virtuous liberty, continue his blessing upon this nation and its government, and give it all possible success and duration." Consistent with the ends of his providence. This is all Judeo-Masonic. The most blessed Trinity, the divine Redeemer, any mention of the Mother of God? Nonsense. Never extolled John Adams, who was extolled by so many Catholics at the time. Few in number that they were, but the leading Catholics among their number, including John Carroll, extolled him. But this is what he believed. This is what he wrote in a letter, April 11th, 1823, to Thomas Jefferson, who had been his ally at the Declaration of Independence. Neither were at the Constitutional Convention in 1787. Adams was the ambassador to the American ambassador to the court of St. James. Jefferson was the ambassador to American ambassador to France. And they later came to clash over policy in the Washington administration. Adams was vice president. Jefferson was secretary of state. Adams was an Anglophile, that he took the English side, during the French Revolution and the wars that were engendered as a result of the French Revolution and later the Napoleonic Wars. And Jefferson was a Francophile, very much influenced by the ideas of the French Revolution. And along with later Andrew Jackson would be as well. But Jefferson and Adams fought each other very much. They ran against each other for the presidency in 1796. Jefferson won the most number of electoral, Adams won the most number of electoral votes. Jefferson won the second highest number. And under the terms of the original Constitution, Article 2 of the Constitution at that time, the person who was vice president was the person who received the second highest number of electoral votes for president. So Jefferson was his vice president. That got changed as a result of this. And the 12th Amendment was ratified so that the electors now vote for one person for president, one person for vice president, one of which must not be from the same state as the elector himself. And they must come from different states. That is, the individuals must come from different states. The individual president and vice presidential candidates for whom the electors vote. But they had bitter battles in the 1790s into the first decade of the 19th century. They became reconciled through the lost art of letter writing that we've all gone crazy over email. I used to be an excellent letter writer. My wife is a terrific one. Her letters are inspirational, they're beautiful, they're magnificent. They help people with the faith far more than my articles do, I will have to admit that. And I think they're publishable one day. If those of you who get them will keep them, I think they are publishable because her letters are truly inspirational. They do more work to help people than my poor articles ever have or will. But Jefferson and Adams became great friends. In fact, they died on the same day, July 4th, 1826, 50 years to the day after the Declaration of Independence was promulgated. All right, but you'll see that men who write in these terms may not have had a very good end. But this is John Adams, April 11th, 1823. And the day will come when the mystical generation of Jesus by the Supreme Being as his Father in the womb of a virgin will be classified with the fable of the generation of Minerva in the brain of Jupiter. But we hope that with the dawn of reason and freedom of thought in these United States, we'll do away with all of this artificial scaffolding. The United States will do away with the artificial scaffolding of the belief in the incarnation of the second person of the Blessed Trinity, the very Word through whom all things were made, and the virginal immaculate womb of our dear Blessed Mother. He also wrote on May 19th, 1821, he asked the following question to Thomas Jefferson. Can a free government possibly exist with a Roman Catholic religion? And then he had also written at the same time, I almost shudder at the thought of alluding to the most fatal example of the abuses of grief which the history of mankind has preserved, the cross. Consider what calamities that engine of grief has produced. Consider what calamities that engine of grief has produced. This is the ethos of the men who framed the Declaration of Independence, of many of those who framed the Constitution. Jefferson and Adams were not there, and of those who were the leaders of this nation after the implementation, the ratification of the Constitution in 1788, and after it went into full effect in 1789, when the first president was inaugurated and the first Congress took office. And this is what's been praised by Catholics in the United States of America, and indeed in the counterfeit Church of Conciliarism, from that day to this, and even obviously beforehand. Cardinal Gasperi, who was the mentor of Pope Pius XII, was an Americanist. Very much influenced by things American. You know, the Vatican II just really didn't happen. Many people favorably disposed in the years prior to the Second Vatican Council and its aftermath to what occurred there. Who were the Council Fathers? Men who had been bishops for a long time, appointed by Pope Pius XI or Pope Pius XII. They had been around for a time. They were influenced with this idea of progress. Pope St. Pius X suppressed modernism, but it never went away. It went underground. We see the germs, if you will, the roots of modernism flowering not only in Europe with the social revolutions, with all of the Enlightenment philosophies, but also here in the United States as well. This spirit of naturalism can also be called, that Catholics made their accommodation with, can also be called liberalism. Liberalism is more than the specific philosophy of which John Locke is truly the father. The belief that men are self-redemptive, they can create these structures sanctioned by the majority to take themselves out of the state of nature by relinquishing part of their liberty in order to protect their more basic rights and liberties, and if men are not satisfied with what has happened, then they can always form a new government and therefore start over again. And I would like to, but it's more, it's a whole philosophy which revolves around the deification of man over and beyond any one particular ideological exponent of it. And it is this influence of liberalism upon Catholic Protestantism and liberalism that produces the modern Catholic mind and ultimately the modernist Catholic mind, so crystallized in the one world ecumenical church of conciliarism. So I would like, in the remainder of this presentation, we have one more to do, to quote to you from the passage of Father Felix Sarda y Savalny's Liberalism is a Sin, that I have in Conversion in Reverse, because it summarizes many of the points I've been making in these presentations. And you can always review this. I've gotten into these things many times online, but it's also good to have some visual and audio. You can record these, record the audio, and then play them back as you will. Father Salvani wrote as follows: Protestantism naturally begets toleration of error. I've explained that before in other presentations. Tolerate theological error, you're going to tolerate philosophical error. Rejecting the principle of authority in religion, meaning the Catholic Church, it is neither criterion nor definition of faith. On the principle that every individual or sect may interpret the deposited revelation according to the dictates of private judgment, it gives birth to endless differences and contradictions. Impelled by the law of its own impotence, through lack of any decisive voice of authority in matters of faith, it is forced to recognize as valid and orthodox any belief that springs from the exercise of private judgment. Gee, that's a good idea. You're a good thinker. Yeah, that sounds good. Kant, Hobbes, Hume, Locke, Nietzsche. Yeah, I like this one. Doesn't sound good. Therefore, does it finally arrive by force of its own premises at the conclusion that one creed is as good as another. It then seeks to shelter its inconsistency under the false plea of liberty of conscience. Belief is not imposed by a legitimately and divinely constituted authority, but springs directly and freely from the unrestricted exercise of the individual's reason or caprice upon the subject matter of revelation. This is of the essence of modernism. It's what Ratzinger believes. Belief comes eternally. It springs up from the wellspring of the individual who reaches out to God, who finds and discovers. God had revealed himself, Joey. God revealed himself. Period. No need to find and discover God. Find and discover the truth. He's revealed it. The individual or the sect, Father Salvani went on to say, interprets as it pleases, rejecting or accepting what it chooses. This is popularly called liberty of conscience. Accepting this principle, infidelity on the same plea, rejects all revelation. And Protestantism, which handed over the premise, is powerless to protest against the conclusion. Protestants, all of these Protestant commentators, Franklin Graham, James Dobson, Pat Robertson, you name it, they're powerless to protest against the conclusions of what was wrought by Protestantism. Obama is the fruit of Protestantism, of the Protestant Revolution. So is the Republican Party, Romney, the Mormons. It's all the fruit, all of the errors of the world. Approximately speaking. And Protestantism has its roots, obviously, in Orthodoxy. The errors of Russia. They all go together. For it is clearer that one who, under the plea of rational liberty, has the right to repudiate any part of revelation that may displease him, cannot logically quarrel with one who, on the plea of rational liberty, on the same plea, no creed is as good as any. Taking the field with this fatal weapon of rationalism, infidelity has stormed and taken the very citadel of Protestantism, helpless against the foe of its own making, which is why most mainstream Protestant sects are dying out. The evangelical and fundamentalist sects have adherents, but the mainstream, the Episcopalians in this country, the Anglicans, the Methodists, Presbyterians, they're dying out. There are very few adherents, relatively speaking. Why? Because once you divorce yourself from the truth of divine revelation, irreligion becomes as good of religion. And Father Salvani, I'll give one of the quote before the end of this particular presentation. Father Salvani points out that hence we find the principle ramifies in many different directions, this principle of rationalism, striking root into our domestic, civil, and political life, whose vigor and health depend upon the nourishing and sustaining power of religion. For religion is the bond which unites us to God, the source and end of all good, and infidelity, whether virtual as in Protestantism or explicit as in agnosticism. Doesn't make any difference. Is there a God? I don't know. Is there a God? I don't know. Severs the bond which binds men to God and seeks to build human society on the foundation of man's absolute independence. Hence we find liberalism laying down as the basis of its propaganda the following principles. Number one, the absolute sovereignty of the individual in his entire independence of God and God's authority. The absolute sovereignty of the individual, the independence of God and God's authority. The true God. Number two, the absolute sovereignty of society and its entire independence on everything which does not proceed from itself. We will make the world better. We will make him better than he was before. No. Three, absolute civil sovereignty and the implied right of the people to make their own laws in entire independence and utter disregard of any other criterion than the popular will, Rousseau, expressed at the polls and in parliamentary majorities. This is Ron Paul's failing, one of his failing marks, ladies and gentlemen, one of his downfalls. He believes that state legislatures have the right to permit or restrict surgical baby killing as they please, and they do not. For no human being, whether acting individually or collectively, has the authority to dispose of and dispense with the binding precepts of the divine, positive, and natural law according to the will of the people. That is wrong, it is false, it is insidious. And anyone who believes that is an enemy of social order, no matter how much you believe in limited government, how much you believe in the words of the Constitution, how much you want to maintain American sovereignty and not send American troops over to needless and immoral wars. Nevertheless, you contend the people have the right to dispense with the binding precepts of the natural, divine, positive law, and natural law, thou shalt not kill. You are an enemy of social order. You're an enemy of Christ the King. And, finally, absolute freedom of thought in politics, morals, or in religion. The unrestrained liberty of the press. There we have it, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get into this in the next presentation. I think my time is about ready to run up. I'm going to explain this in a little bit more detail.